Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke. Been a little bit of a weird morning with this, setting up the live stream because normally I'll put the title in so people can see what this is. And I put the title in and hit done and it removed my title. I was like, okay. So I started over again. It doesn't take that long. It takes about 15 seconds to do. And then it was a little bit of a hesitation coming on live. So hopefully we don't get like a connection interruption or something because no reason why there should be a connection problem here. So, but if that happens, then I'll just pause and come back. And good morning, Melissa. Yeah, this is, it's a little bit, today's gotten to be a little bit more sultry out. It's a bit cloudy, but it was actually really pretty this morning when I got up. I woke up, I have skylights, to see the moon and behind the clouds. It was just kind of like, the clouds were all kind of mottled and you could just see the moon shining through, kind of like mother of pearl kind of thing. It was really pretty. And, it was, yeah, so it was just a really, I think it's going to be a very warm day today. Today is the day that I actually go over to Riverside Wellness and talk with Corinna about doing Rouhani over there. So I'm going to be chatting with her about that. One of the things I've decided I want to do with the Rouhani is have a free informational session for people so that they know. I mean, people who watch this will have heard my gushing. This is my UK friends would say gushing about this. But that way I figured people who might be interested in it but not, and be fair enough that people don't know what it is because it's something that's definitely common in England and Ireland. It's not, you don't hear that much about Rouhani here. Although somebody who was in my class was from Bucks County, so I was like, oh, you're about 40 minutes away from me. So there are more people in the USA learning it, whether or not they're promoting it. Some people are what they call Rouhani ambassadors. But those are people also at level 2 and who can also teach it, which is where I would like to go to. But, like I said, I have to wait the 6 months. It's not like I can, and that's probably fair enough because you want to get enough experience. You want to be learning about things with people. But like I woke up this morning and I was starting one of my headaches. I get these, oh, good morning, Sam. I woke up and I had one of my headaches starting this morning, and so I thought, okay, let's see what the Rouhani does with this. Because, I mean, right now I'm in what they call the, you usually do a 21-day, you do Rouhani on yourself. Probably, I mean, I feel like it's a good thing to do every day, but I did that this morning. And, yeah, I mean, and my body was hurting because yesterday was funny because I went outside and I decided, my friend Jenny actually and her husband had lent me their power washer. And so I power washed my patio yesterday. And I was completely covered in mud. It was just so funny. It was like all my jeans, my trainers, everything, sneakers. They were just completely covered. So I actually had to hose off before I could go back into the house because it was just really bad. But it took me 2 hours. But it's significantly better. Probably could still use a little touch up, but it was quite a job. But anyway, I started with the Rouhani today, and I did that. And I have to say, I mean, at least as of right now, I feel markedly better. So, yeah, it's pretty potent stuff. Today the thing I was going to talk about a bit, in addition to this, I've got so many things going on. I'd forgotten that I was supposed to peer review an article for a journal, and I went, oh God, maybe they'll be like, hi, could you get that done? I was like, okay, I guess I better push that up on the list. It's just that I've not been on my academic account since the semester ended. And so I was like, oops, yep, sorry, I better get on that. But plus I'm editing somebody else's book, plus I think about how many things I'm doing and I feel like that Two of Pentacles, like I've got so many balls in the air right now. But it's all good. I mean, and everything's just kind of moving in the direction that I want it, I need it to, I guess. So it's all very good. But the topic I was going to discuss today, which came up in my mind this morning, had something to do with the Azrael channelings, because that's something that I've put up recently. I did a 5th session, which I've not, I need to look it over, and I don't usually do a lot of editing to them. I know sometimes, now it seems to be that there's more of a flow to them, but initially there might have been long gaps. And like I said, 4 was the most interesting one because in 4 you actually, I think I mentioned this, you actually hear a disembodied voice. At a point during the meditation, I fell asleep for, like I said, I thought it was like 30 minutes, but actually I was asleep for only like 3 minutes. And during that time, there was a voice outside of me. And when I first heard that, I went, whoa. But I think the purpose of that voice, and what it was saying, had to do with the fact that it's not that, again, I tend to be, as I explain to people when I'm doing my work, I have an academic background. To a lot of people who know me as somebody who did tech, who did data analysis, who did, who's been an academic, who talks to my students about evidence and evidentiary stuff, which, again, I'm not saying that I've disavowed all of that, because I haven't. But sometimes for somebody like me, it's been harder to come into things like mediumship, and harder to come into things because my mind gets in the way a lot, because I'm used to thinking in a certain way. And it's not always bad to think in that way, because sometimes, you don't want to be so ungrounded, that that you're not necessarily, there may be some things that you don't see realistically. It was like some friends of mine used to say when we would talk about things like angel numbers, for instance. Okay, people see 1111, or they see 444, or they see 222, any of these kinds of combinations, and they start like going out and deliberately looking for them. And as one of my friends said once, she's like, sometimes 1111 is just an 1111. It's like, kind of just putting things into perspective as to where they belong. Although synchronicities are very interesting. Now that I'm offering this dream class on Saturday, which if anybody's interested in that, of course, that's I know at least one person here's taking it. But it's going to be it's on my transitionlifecoaching.net/event-list. Yeah, that's the one. Or just go to transitionlifecoaching.net and click on events. And right now, I'm going to be putting other ones up. And also, I have a group area. So if anybody subscribed to anything on my page, I'm going to be putting meditations and documents and some other things in that page. So I just haven't populated it yet. So there's going to be some stuff there. And that's for people who subscribe and get like a package or multiple services with me, or who do regular coaching with me. So, but this is all very new. So I'm like, got to get all this stuff up. But the Azrael stuff is interesting, and so it's a matter. I guess point being is that I tend to be somebody who tends to take a much more grounded approach. I've always been very terrestrial in the kind of stuff that I do. I'm not a person who's a fan of terms like ascension and 5D and things. I tend to think of it more like, because my problem with the term ascension, 5D is probably okay, but in terms of ascension, a lot of times it goes back to this kind of idea that we are trying to rise above this terrible earth that we live on. Like, life is terrible and it's suffering, and now we're going to move into another dimension that's better than this one. And I think sometimes, even if that's not really what's meant by that term, I think sometimes that's what a lot of people take away from it, because the idea of transcendence is something that we've had for a long time. And that comes down to kind of some of the work that I have. When I talked to Corinne the other day, and I was telling her I was channeling Azrael, she goes, do you channel any other archangels? She goes, because I think if you talked about that to people, they're going to freak out that, you're channeling the angel of death. It just sounds really scary to people, and they're like, okay, I don't want anything to do with that. And I understand her point on that entirely. But Azrael's point is like, yeah, but that's not, people tend to think of it like you're like the Grim Reaper coming, and that's not really what he does. I mean, yes, he is the angel who would come at the moment that somebody is passing on to help them pass over, calmly and safely. But he says, I'm here, and I also help people with other kinds of transitions too. And right now, we're going through another major shift and transition. And I've talked a little bit about this in other live streams. But again, I kind of keep going back to that Roman Empire period where we had, which is actually when Christianity became a new religion, and that became a thing, because you also had you had Christianity, which was kind of considered to be the Nazarene sect of Judaism at that time. They referred to as the Nazarenes initially because Jesus of Nazareth, right? You had, and of course, you had Judaism there in Rome. They had a temple, and then you had a lot of the mother goddess worshippers. You had the Kybele worshippers and the Ma, she's called, the Cappadocian Ma, which was very similar, who was very similar to Kybele. And so you had these, and then you had these wild orgiastic, Earth Mother kind of rites that you had with the Galli and so forth, which the Romans just didn't know what to do with. But the Romans, what religions they tended to allow in was based on what the Sibylline oracles had said at the time. And that was one of them, including Apollo worship. So some of the Greek gods were also, and as we know, a lot of the Greek gods got translated and got Roman names. So they copied a lot of Greek mythology into what became Roman mythology, because Roman initially didn't have any kind of mythology. They were very It was all a lot of local deities, the genius loci, or the lares, the local spirits that people had in the household. I've been reading about the Essenes lately. Yeah, and the Essenes were certainly a Judaic sect. They were kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? They were almost they were on the side. There was basically two sides of Judaism that time. There was the Hellenistic Judaism, and then there's what we would tend to think of as the Pharisees, which I know the Pharisees get kind of a bad rap in the Bible, but the Pharisees were the ones who wanted a more Orthodox Judaism, and they didn't like the Hellenistic one because they felt it was a little bit too open, a little too secular. And really after the Hanukkah incident, the Maccabean revolt, where you had the idea of Hanukkah, where you have the oil that should only be for one day that lasted for 7 days. After all, the holy oil was most of it was tainted by, I can never remember the name of the emperor who came in at the time, but tried to install a statue of Zeus in the temple and so forth, and tried to push that out. And then there was the Maccabean revolt, Judah Maccabee and his family. They pushed the forces out, and they were able to reclaim their temple. They did that with the help of the Romans, interestingly enough. But Rome at that time, you had this, and the Essenes were certainly there, and they were part of that. And the Essenes were part of these sects that were kind of, it was interesting because some of the writings that we have that are connected, what they call the apocryphal or extra writings, that's where you start to get into these ideas that are almost Zoroastrian, like these cosmic battles of good and evil, where they start to come in. But the Essenes were also noted for being more, kind of more on the edge, but they were definitely very pious in their observances and so forth, and perhaps more often considered to be more meditative. There's some discussion that the Dead Sea Scrolls, that they are, and certainly that there's definitely the stash of Dead Sea Scrolls, and then there's some other writings as well that have been discovered. There's the Nag Hammadi codices and things like that have that have to do with these groups that were not necessarily part of what the central establishment might have been, but they all were kind of espousing, and you see a lot of this now too. Like you may have certain good morning, Jenny. You may have some of these kinds of groups. There were a lot of different groups, and then there was a lot of fragmentation too within these groups. So around the time of the Roman Empire, you have all of these different groups, and this is also just because you were covering. An empire covers a large area. The Roman Empire was huge. So when you get to be huge like that, whatever your local practices were, it's going to expand beyond that, and people are going to hear these new ideas and say, oh, well, how do these new ideas fit in with the ideas that I have? Because this is a way of people kind of integrating into a community. And I think we talk a lot now about things like cultural appropriation, and yes, that is a thing that you have to be very careful of. You don't want to start taking some of these ancient and very sacred things and just kind of casually using them, in a way that would be offensive or improper in a normal context. But at the same time, people also need to realize that there is such a thing as syncretism, that the more you're around people and you hear your ideas, and if you like their ideas, then you're going to say, okay, a lot of what we think of as the modern, people use the term New Age, which again, people tend to use pejoratively, but New Age is kind of a movement like Gnostic or Orphic, or it's just, it covers a whole umbrella of ideas. And a lot of times people are saying, okay, and personally, I don't see why, when you're talking about a more global society, why you wouldn't have these different influences coming in from different places. I'm not necessarily against the idea that people were going to say, oh, okay, I'm a practicing Christian, but I bring things in from Buddhism, or I bring things in, I don't think there's, again, it almost goes back to the idea of the Hellenistic Jews versus the ones who are more of the Pharisees. No, we need to keep the purity of the religion versus we're kind of open to other ideas. So, I don't know. People will have their own opinions on that, and I'm not here to judge anybody's opinion on that one way or the other. But we are kind of in a period like that now. So this is really, I'm talking about Azrael here, if you join me a little bit later. And so the reason I think that he is coming through so strongly, first of all, as you know, I work with transitions. So I'm a lot of my focus, because every coach has kind of their own focus, their own thing that they do. And for me, my whole life has been about kind of helping people through big changes, because we don't think of, we think of the finality of death, right? But that's not the only major shifts where we might have like little deaths in our lifetime. We might, for example, when we move out and live on our own for the first time and we're not living with our parents anymore, when you make that transition, you become a different person. If somebody was to go into the military, they would become a different person. You know, being a soldier is a different kind of identity. You'd be a different person, right? If you move into a space where you are, you know, you're doing anything, a woman who becomes a mother, okay? That's a different kind of identity. Now, you know, now you're dealing with this new human being that you've produced. That's a different kind of a life. So something always changes, and something from the way you were before dies, so to speak. There's an aspect of you that is gone. And sometimes we spend time mourning that, or sometimes we get stuck in between these transitions where we just feel like we can't, we still kind of want to go back to the old way. And I think in a broader sense, what's happening is that we've got, just like at that Roman Empire time, which is why I keep bringing it up, it's almost like I feel like we're doing something like that again. Like there's a shift in the way that we think about things, in things that we always took for granted as, well, this is the way you do things, or this is the right thing, or this is that now people are judging things differently. And that's happening more on a mass scale. And again, you're having a very similar reaction. You'll have some people who withdraw and say, no, we have to go back to the way it was, and we have to have a purity of intention, and it's got to be this, and you know, and then there's other people who are saying, well, no, there's these new things, and we have to find where they fit in, and not everybody agrees about how to do that. We have all these big wars that are going on. And I think about like the Israel-Palestine type thing that's going on right now. That has happened over and over and over again. And I don't know, I just feel like there's there's this thing that just seems to be going on over and over again. And I think, you know, that there seems to be some flipping of categories and expectations and what we think in that particular situation too, without getting too deeply into that. But again, I feel like there's just some of these things that are repeating. And kind of what came into my head this morning was when we talk about the definition of insanity, and the definition of sanity is kind of making the same mistake over and over again and expecting that somehow the outcome's going to be different. There's a certain element of that with the things that are happening. And it's like, okay, when are we going to wake up from that? And, you know, judgment card has been coming up a lot in tarot for me. When are people going to wake up? When are people going to wake up and realize that, you know, there's got to be a new way of seeing things? And that's been, and like I said, on the personal level, that's been translating to the way we deal with relationships, the way we deal with work, the way we deal with money and economies, and all of this stuff just feels like it's shifting. So this is why I think Azrael is trying to come in. Now, mind you, I don't see myself as any kind of like special messenger or whatever. I'm just one person here who's talking. There's tons and tons of other people who probably are also feel like, you know, maybe channeling or may have certain messages that are coming through, and the people who need to hear them will hear them. So I'm not making it out like I've got any kind of special charge or anything like that, because I don't. It's just weird to me that it's happening. But and as I mentioned, yeah, I've done an Azrael 5, which actually, Jen, I think you're the one who asked me some questions about some of the other ones. And so he does answer some of those questions in 5, so that one will be coming up. So it's, yeah, but it's, the whole point is that Azrael is showing up more as an archangel along with the other ones, because he's trying to say, look, you know, you're going through just like a person who would be going through that physical movement from one to the other, yeah, coolness, that would go from one physical form to another. Similarly, when spiritually or in terms of dimensional shift, whatever's going on, however we want to view that and look at that, he's also trying to help us very gently move through that one as well. Okay, so that's really why I feel like he's there and why he's trying to send messages. And one thing that I seem to find, like when I go back and listen to what is said, is that he seems to be kind of saying like, well, you know, why is everybody preoccupied with death anyway? Like, why, like you have this really nice life here now. Like, why are we preoccupied with, you know, like, why, you know, you've got so many good things, and there's so, I mean, yes, there's terrible things, sure, but there's wonderful things. Like, we're kind of always focused on the negative things, and and what's wrong, and why things are not the way we want them to be. It's like a perpetual Four of Cups situation where we're just kind of like, yeah, well, I got this, but but I don't have that over there. Or, oh yeah, but I used to have that, and now I don't have it now. Like, we kind of get very caught up in that kind of way of thinking, and we all do it. I mean, I'm not saying this judgmentally of anybody, because I do it too. I mean, certainly. But it's, but they're basically saying, there's so much here to open up to. And I think that's where he's trying to move people. But, so I feel like that's why he's coming through. But again, it's a matter of, this is one of the reasons I think symbolism and association and shifting the association with symbols is very important and can be very important. Now, we've often seen that happen in a negative way. So, for example, there's the swastika symbol, which in India is a symbol of the sun. And similarly, like you see, I have behind me, I have the Brigid cross behind me over my bed, which we're familiar with they'll call her Saint Brigid, or, I think of her as Brigid, which is my own name. But I had that up from the Imbolc February 2nd type festivals. I usually put that over my altar. And that's actually another version of a swastika. It's a sun symbol. But it's not. But then the swastika was co-opted by the Nazis in the late 30s and 30s and 40s, and so now when we see that, especially the black swastika in the circle with the red, we now have a very negative association with that. That's associated with white supremacy, and it's associated with genocide and things like that. Whereas that's not what this is about at all. But that's what the Nazis, that's what they did. They actually tried to take a lot of the symbolism. They take a lot of Norse symbolism too, and and it's been co-opted for their purposes. And so we see how an association can be negatively transformed. But the question is too, can an association be positively transformed? So to me, there's a lot of terminologies around that. And Azrael is one where I think when people, have this association with this idea of the angel of death, we always think of it, again, as having like this Grim Reaper-ish kind of a thing. But that's really not, he's saying, no, that's not, that's not what I'm about. That's a form that people have come up with to emphasize a certain aspect that they're afraid of. And that's certainly not how I've experienced him. I don't have, the first time I experienced Azrael, I was like, ooh, but that was more just like, I don't know what this energy is that's coming and working with me. And I'm always very cautious about what comes in, when it does come in. So I feel like that it kind of needs to be explained that this is not, he is one of the archangels, and typically, like, he's been working, in my sphere, he says he's working with Michael and Uriel, in particular. And yeah, he's not a bad guy. He's not somebody who's there, like, if he shows up, it's not like, oh no, As I said, he's been around me for months now, and I'm still here, as I like to say. So, so there's not that kind of an element. Just like when I use the word tantra, like a lot of people automatically, and some people get annoyed with me because I don't emphasize sexual aspect of tantra, and I'm like, well, tantra is not just about sex. And the reason I don't emphasize that part of it, even though, yes, it has to do with the merging of masculine and feminine energies, and that might be expressed in Tantra through literal, people literally having intercourse. But that's not my focus, because to me, that's not how I practice Tantra. To me, it's more about what they call the Shri Chakra, the Shri Yantra, and that kind of focusing on Sri Lalita Devi, who is the chief deity of the Shri Chakra, and how she is, she's the one that brings abundance and life and the good things and desires and so forth. And good morning, Leela. And so that, and to me, the honoring of the Sri Chakra and the prayers and everything around that, and also just the whole idea that Tantra is really about, as I've said it in the simplest possible terms, is the idea that you living an ordinary life, just being a regular person, doing a regular thing, not doing anything extraordinary, not, being no apotheosis, no being carried up to heaven or whatever. You as a regular, ordinary person can live a fully spiritual life and be enlightened. That's really what that's about. That's all that it says. And the reason it has such a bad reputation is because it didn't start among the Vedic scholars. It started among, I think it was fishermen in India, who actually were the tantric masters, because it was just regular people, and it was like, a lot of them may not have been literate, they couldn't have read the Vedas, so they they have their own. And in fact, interestingly, a lot of what we think of as puja, when you go to a Hindu temple when they do puja, a lot of that comes out of Tantra. Tantra influences a lot of things. And so to me, when I talk about having a tantric view, you could also call it an alchemical view. And when we talk about alchemy, again, at the most fundamental level, we're talking about taking base metals and turning them into gold, right? It's not even just base metals. It's literally taking like manure, like crap, and using that to transmute it into gold, which is kind of people who are familiar with the violet flame. Like that's pretty much what that does with Archangel Zadkiel, and also Saint Germain is often associated with the violet flame. But that's basically an energy that takes your negative energy and transforms it into, I'm going to say, I don't even necessarily like the terms negative positive, because I feel more it's like more things that are more like that manure, and they turn it into the gold. They turn it into the treasure that you can use, rather than the thing that makes you ill, weighs you down, makes you depressed, makes you anxious, makes you constantly worried about the future or ruminating on the past. It takes that energy and makes it into something that you can use now. So to me, that's where I'm at. I'm like, yeah, that's the transformation. That's the transition, right? So that's where all of these elements end up being part of my practice, because it's like, no, it's all these resources that we have, these spiritual resources that we have that will help us move into this new space. So, yeah. So anyway, that's the thought that I had today. But that's really the reason, because I think for some people they say, okay, well, you're working with Rouhani and all this stuff, and then you're kind of doing all this stuff that sounds very, very dark. But as I've said, like I said, on my other channel is called Katonia. It has to do with the way that people deal with darkness. And because to me, we all like to say, well, I want to focus on all the pretty and happy things. And I'm like, yes, but you also don't want to repress, bypass, or just ignore all those other things about you, because not only are they something to be confronted and dealt with if we want to live happy lives, but it's also, this is just part of who we are. I mean, it's okay to have days where you ugly cry or get mad and stuff like that. We all, we were always kind of told like, oh no, we should never, I think you don't want to shame yourself out of being human and the feelings that you have. The question is, how do you work them in a way that's constructive? That's going to, because I feel like all of those things happen for a reason. I mean, we can start to feel sick and slow down because maybe our body is telling us, whoa, you're burning the candle at both ends and you're burning out, you need a rest. And, it could be that. Sometimes we hit a crisis and anxiety so that, not so that we can be paralyzed, but so that we can reach a point of saying, oh wow, I need to really do something different or think about this differently. Like there's a lot there that we, that we basically, it's that whole principle of like behaviorism. We seek pleasure and we avoid pain, but we can transform those moments. And I think that's really where I'm coming at with the work that I do. And I'm just, I'm finding Rouhani now to be a really, really useful tool for that. Wow, we've gotten this card a lot this week. This is funny. Anyway, we'll get there. Okay, so our central card today, what was I talking about? Endings and changings. We have the Ten of Swords, which in this deck is the Rebirth card. And the Nietzschean, we move from the camel to the lion to the boy. It's kind of like these different phases that we have in life. And it's the times in which we... Excuse me, I need a coffee. It's this rebirth. It's this, in other words, whatever state you're in right now, it's going to move you to a new state. It's not that you have to run away from the state that you're in. Whatever you're in, you're moving through it, and it's going to move you to a new state. So this is basically saying that people who are watching this, who need to see this, are at a point of rebirth. Something from the past is just going to be done. It's going to be over. And now it's time to look forward. And again, that could be about a lot of things. It could be about an individual situation, or it could just be more generally about something about your identity, how you live your life. There's a lot of things that this could refer to, and you individually will know what they are for you. But there's definitely the sense that something has ended, okay? And what we're unaware of that is problematic is, again, this comparison card, this Five of Swords, where, the bamboo comparing itself to the tree, to the whatever kind of tree this is. Doesn't if it's an oak tree, if it's a maple tree, whatever. It's more what we think of as more of a, bamboo is obviously more eastern. This is more the kind of trees that we might see. I guess you would see them in the east too, but particularly here. But anyway, these are two different types of plant. And if one says, oh, well, I'm not an adequate plant, because I'm not like this, or whatever, saying, well, you're not the same thing. So what this is saying, Five of Swords indicates internally that's that yes but energy. It's like, well yes, I'm this is ending. I'm making a change, but kind of what I talked about yesterday. That sense of like, well, yeah, but just I just have to sort out this thing in my life first before I can really change. And we all do that because that's the control element that we have, where we're like, oh, okay, I've got to make this neat and I got to make that neat, and I have to fold all the corners and iron it perfectly, and dot the I's, cross the T's, whatever kind of metaphor you want to use here, before I change, before I go. But we're at a point where it's like, okay, we're moving forward. There's no turning back from that. And yeah, externally we are aware perhaps that we are fighting. Okay, this is the the Knight of Clouds again, or the Knight of Swords. So again, there's this idea of resistance, like, oh no, I can only do it this way. I can only do it this way, And this is saying, but the old ways come to an end. And if you move, you allow yourself to move into whatever the next space is for you. And again, this was the card I said that repeats. This card. There just seems to be this reiterated message here that you want to get away from this kind of thinking that is limiting. That says, if I don't do it this way, I'm going to fail. And again, regardless of what that has to do with, or if somebody's in a relationship and they feel it's time to move out of that relationship, then it might be a case of, oh, but I really can't move out of this relationship because of this or because of that. Or, oh, I'm afraid of looking like a bad person. Or, oh, I'm afraid that I can't make it on my own. Or, I remember that feeling around the time I got divorced. I had a lot of people who had told me for probably the last few years of my marriage, they were like, you need to get out of this. This is awful. You need to get out of it. But I was like, well, I just need to make sure the cats are taken care of. I'm worried about him taking them. I'm worried about what I'm going to be able to, I'm not going to be able to make it financially if I'm not married to him, even though he wasn't really contributing anything. I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to do that. And I just thought, oh, I'm not going to be able to. And then I just woke up one day and it was like, okay, it's time. It's time. I literally heard it. That literally was the voice. It's time. And I was like, but how am I going to do this? And they're like, but all of a sudden I sat down and I really started to think about it. I said, okay, well, how much would it cost for me to rent my own apartment? How much would it cost to do this? How much am I making? How much more do I need to make? I just literally sat down and ran the numbers. And I said, you know what? At that time I was working as a librarian. I said, if I keep working my Sundays, I have to be very careful with money, but I can do it. And eventually, I'll work better jobs and get more money. And that's exactly what happened. And so I ended the relationship, and I was so happy that I did, because it wasn't helping me and it wasn't helping him. Realistically, it was both ways. And I even said that to him. I said, you're not going to grow as a person in this relationship because you kind of have this thing that your wife is the person you're going to hang on to, and she's just going to carry you through everything. And you need to figure your own stuff out. And eventually he did. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know he got married a second time and it didn't work out. I remember he called me and told me about it. And I was like, well, you might just not be a person who does well in marriage. It was fine when I had him as a friend. When I married him, I was like, So it was just, sometimes people, they just, unless he kind of had to wake up in his own adjustment, it was like, ultimately I just said, look, this is not about just me. I'm like, this is also good for you. That was to me like creating the universe, like, okay, you need to get off and grow up and decide how you're going to put your big boy pants on and do your own things, and not say, oh, my wife knows all this stuff, so she can just do it all for me. And it's like, no, this is a partnership. This is not about, one person, clinging onto the other one and letting them manage everything for them, At least that's not the way I saw it. So, but that's just another example. I always talk about the work thing, but there's other ways that you can look at this too. And the outcome, understanding you have always been free. This is really the Knight of Cups card, or the Knight of Water. So really what this is about opportunities. This is about opportunities coming in, like in a regular, more, like I would say the more traditional decks. This is one of those ones that kind of has this more Eastern inflection to it. But it's understanding that you've been free and understanding that there's opportunity and that you can move. So it's a matter of finding the opportunities, not living in this space where, or sometimes we're not even comparing ourselves to other people. We could just be comparing states. We could be saying, oh, well, this is the way I was before, and now that I've changed, I don't have this thing that I had anymore, and I liked having that. So now I think it's a bad thing that I'm changing or something. Like we kind of do that because we start to miss. That's more of the Five of Cups energy, right? We grieve what we lost in the past. But it's saying, yeah, but you can have that again in a new way, is what this is saying. I did want to pull, before I go, a couple of others. Maybe because I've been working a little bit with Kuan Yin this morning, I was inspired to use the Wisdom of the Tao deck. Now, this was given to me by my friend Vivian, and who I grew up with. She grew up. She lived next door to my grandmother. It was like our house, my grandmother's house, and then her family. And so I knew their family. They always had a bunch of cats that I used to go and visit all the time. And then I would go in and I would visit, her mother and her father. Like that was the kind of the way the neighborhood was then. You know, you just kind of randomly wandered into people's house and they'd be like, "Hi, you want some ice cream?" Like today, nobody would do that, but that's what we did back in the 70s and the early 80s. So it was. In any case, I've known her for years. I think she went to high school around the same time as my oldest brother, and so. She was, So anyway, she had bought this deck from Meijing Liu, who was actually a medium, but then she decided she wasn't really doing much with cards, so she had given the deck to me. So anyway, I feel like we need a Wisdom of the Tao Oracle. I actually do like this deck a lot. It is actually a really good deck. But it's just, I prefer the decks that I can just kind of tell you off the top of my head rather than having to look something up. But this is one that I'm more, you get the full meaning of it by looking it up. So our card for today is, and I just got the Knight of Water and I've got the Opportunity card. And this is the Snake card. So remember, this is referring to Chinese astrology. So we have Snake. So let me tell you what this is about. This is the message from here for today. And that's just really funny. Opportunity. Okay, Snake is, okay. Here we go. It's in the, okay, wait. Here we go. Okay. Your time has finally arrived. Your wisdom is garnered from years of contemplation, planning, and experience. In fact, this card is telling you that the planning stage is over. You are about to make a move, a smart move. Coolness and inaction are exactly where your strength comes from. You prepare well, and the information you gather supports you in all your endeavors. You are a fire element with great yin. Yin fire ignites healings and connections between the spiritual and the physical. Interesting, right? And also think about the fact that the Knight of Cups is about opportunities coming in. Like sometimes inaction and waiting for the opportunity to come is a thing. You are on the tree high above the water. The water from the lake in this image harmonizes with your yin fire. It portrays a perfect balance. Snake symbolizes rebirth. This can mean some significant... And what was the first card we got? Rebirth? Was it not? This card can mean that some significant changes are coming to your life. Something old and negative will metaphorically die as the new and positive emerges. I couldn't make this up. Perhaps you are in the middle of a powerful transition and need to get rid of as many old attachments to embrace the new self. Yeah. Most often, you don't show what you know and you keep your ideas to yourself. This card reminds you to share your wisdom and knowledge because it is safe to do so. Your extensive analytical and logical skills make you a formidable competitor. Consequently, you are not good at handling losses. A lot of people are not. However, failure often teaches more than success. The Snake card is asking you to take a deep breath and use your great wisdom to benefit from learned lessons. This card also indicates you have a keen interest in the arts and avid reader. Perhaps it's your time to become an author. The opportunity is here. Okay, that might be true for some people. The mysterious and unknown fascinate you. Your psychic energy helps you to tap into that world of the unconscious as you continue to learn from it. Remember to step out into the sun once in a while. The great yang energy of the sun helps you integrate what you have learned into valuable knowledge for humankind. Wow. Okay? I just think this is funny because they literally just... It's not only what we got in the other reading, but it's literally everything I just said. So, and why not as a bonus, I also pulled out the, what do they call this deck? I always forget. The Between Worlds deck. Yeah, I don't know why I couldn't. Speaking of transitions. So, we'll pull one more transitional card for today. I think the message is pretty clear today, but let's just see what we get from this one. Yep. Okay. I'm going to go with this top one here. our card is the crone. Okay, and this is going to be one of the astrological ones. I think this might be Virgo, but let me see. Cancer, actually. And we're in the time of Cancer right now, so. A haunting, resolute figure, the crone inhabits a realm of in-betweens. Over the years, they have learned to accept themselves completely, and as such can stand calm in the lawless unknown. They are older, wise, and unafraid. They speak truth to power without breaking a sweat. The crone also understands death, for they have been witness to much of it, and act as a shepherd for those grieving. And I was just talking about Azrael at the beginning of this, right? This is Azrael energy. The crone is a powerful and paradoxical energy to be worked with. It is worked with carefully, but worked with. So, spot on. Yeah, yes. It's amazing. Yeah, I feel like all three of these, I mean, there was some discussion the other day. My friend Ellen has been doing daily readings on her Spiral Priestess Instagram account, Spiral Priestess, one word. And she's also a very gifted reader. But Stephen Bright, who actually did the, the Spirit Within Tarot, I think it's called. I love that deck. It's the one where there's kind of the people are in shadow. But I guess he knows Ellen. And he had made a comment on her thread saying, it's so interesting how you can use different decks and how the messages kind of still manage to connect with each other. And that's just always the fascinating thing. So when we talk about synchronicities, a lot of times people talk about it in a very kind of superficial way, but I think synchronicity is such a big thing. We have, and I think maybe I was starting to say this before, when as soon as I was talking about the dream analysis class, all of a sudden, every post I'm reading is about people talking about their dreams. So, there's just different energies that end up sort of becoming attracted to you, and then you start to see them. But some people think it's just a psychological thing, like, oh, I'm thinking about that. But I don't really spend 24 hours a day thinking about the class. I know it's something I'm doing. It's in my mind. But, I've got a lot of other things on my mind, too. So when I see those things come up, it's just like, yeah, sometimes we get those things, those guide signs, and whether but they're not merely coincidences, is I guess what I'm saying. It's not necessarily that they're being put with intention, but something in you is using that as a way to get a message to you, in the same way that the cards might do it, in the same way that you might just get that information spontaneously from your inner voice, but of course a lot of us are trained not to listen to it. So sometimes it tries to get your attention in other ways. It puts the billboard up and goes, hey, look at that. And then that actually can kind of generate that in you. So anyway, I think this is a great time for opportunity for everybody watching this. I think you have a chance to move forward. You have a chance to move away from an old situation, I'm reminded of what's said in the Secret Language of Light deck, and they said, what resonates with your soul is that which brings you joy. So if you're doing something and you're kind of like, well, this really hurts and I hate it and I don't want to do it anymore, but here we go, suck it up. I think if that's the space you're living in, then that might be where you might want to reevaluate and say, okay, well, do I really need to be sucking it up here? Is there another way that I can do things and bring joy to myself? So anyway, that's it for me today. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I always love doing these live streams. I love having you guys here. Love talking to you guys, and hope you all have a great and fantastic day, and that everything goes the way you want it to this week. That if you're stuck between and you're looking for opportunities, that your mind comes up with them and you're able to figure things out. And and I will be here again tomorrow morning. So have a great rest of your day. Take care.